You're such an asshole.
Hello, children. Oh, we got a lot of chords. Hang on, that's gonna shake the thing there. Back in the Southern Command. Back in the Southern Command again. Dear asshole, I'd like to tap your opinion on the fallout when Deutsche Bank fails. Well, it's looking likely too. When Lehman Brothers failed, we had a worldwide recession. We had a small British bank fail with no real problems. Also, Lloyd's of London, was forced by our stunningly stupid Gordon Brown, I remember him, to absorb TSB. Later, the Competition Commission forced them to re-separate. I have a small manufacturing business in the UK, £1 million turnover. That's what, 1.8 million US, 15% profit. That's good. 1 million in the bank, 20% of that in Australia. I sent money to Australia when Britain started quantitative easing because of a fear of runaway inflation. I know that's too much to hold as cash, but it's been all I can do to run the business at the moment. Well, let me tell you another thing. We did I know this isn't part of your request, but it'll help you anyway. I think I even have a video out there called Hedges Against Inflation, or Best Ways to Hedge Against Inflation. And keep in mind, even if the economy goes to shit and people are not spending money, it's not being recirculated into the economy, and especially when the government prints it off and gives it to the banks and bails them out, as the case was with TARP and whatever Europe did, that money will find its way into certain asset prices. So if you want to hedge against inflation, historically what's been the best thing has been the stock market, because the value of a stock is determined by future profits, or the expectations thereof of future profits, and those profits are going to be inflated. So the companies, in a sense, the company's assets that generate the goods and services are generating goods and services into the future that will be at future prices, which have a natural built-in inflationary hedge in them, which then drives corporate profits up. Not real profits, you adjust for inflation, they won't necessarily be up. But it has been that the stock market is, historically, has been a good hedge against inflation. I like your idea of investing in Australian dollars. I'd have a little bit more diversified. Maybe some US dollars, some Chinese yuan. But that's up to you. But if you're looking for something to hedge against runaway inflation, there's, historically speaking, again, I can't promise the future. Having a little bit in the stock market's not the worst thing, because that's where the money went. That's where the money, that happened in the the housing bubble. Governments all over the world just printed off a ton more money. What happened? Asset and housing prices were reinflated. Did corporate profits go up? No. I love it. The stock market almost tripled. I think no. Corporate profits didn't triple. I mean, from the dearth, from the Great Recession, they probably tripled. But the long-term rolling average profits didn't triple. You quadrupled the money supply. And since it's in the banking system, they lent it out to the corporations. They bought back shares because they weren't going to invest in new equipment, because why would you? That's where the money goes. So the money's got to go somewhere. So if you're worried about inflation and it coming through a bank bailout like this, you may want to throw some money into the stock market, even though based on fundamentals, it's horrendously overpriced. Although I got to check. Last I checked, I was like, wait a minute, is the stock market almost accurately valued? I think at least the S&P 500 looked like it was almost entering back to sane pricing. In any case, small but set the money when bears started quantitative easing. If you're runaway inflation, I know that's too much to hold in cash, but it's been all I can do to run the business for the moment. Question is, what happens in your opinion when Deutsche Bank fails, and how will it affect me and my situation as above? I'm an engineer, and I still really don't get the connection that made Lehman's collapse lead to a hard recession, which made me lay people off. All right, let's differentiate between now and then and Deutsche Bank versus Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers collapsing was the tip of the iceberg, or the one pox of the measles, the one boil of the measles, on a completely diseased and infected body. Lehman Brothers collapsing was just the first. That was it. And was a sign of things much more thoroughly, completely, and fundamentally wrong with the U.S. economy, particularly our housing market. And in that case, not only were housing prices so overvalued by 40%, but it had spread through to other parts of the economy, namely through the repackaging of mortgages, going into pension funds. We even managed to bankrupt some poor Norwegian municipality in their pension because they bought AAA mortgage bonds. It had so permeated the rest of the U.S. economy, and I didn't know if you knew this, Americans are stupid, and Americans had so over-leveraged themselves, taking equity out of their homes to buy trips to Europe, cars they couldn't afford. They were borrowing it. They didn't need. I had gone well beyond just this isolated bubble in the housing market. It's called contagion. It's contagious. It spreads. And so when the real problem was profligate spending, way too much debt, not enough underlying economic production, when that finally came to a head, and people were just, it got to the point it was criminal. People were just taking out loans, the ninja, no income, no assets, no job. When it got to that level and people weren't paying it back, Lehman Brothers just happened to be the first one. I think AG was all these other companies should have gone out of business, but they didn't. It's just that Lehman Brothers was just unfortunate. They were too early to the game, too early to the party. Had they waited around, they probably would have gotten bailed out too. So scores more companies, GM, not even finance companies, not even banks, would have gone belly up because of such a drastic misallocation of resources, and that is the definition of a recession, is a misallocation of resources. And we're talking trillions of dollars, trillions. So that was a disease-ridden body where every organ in the United States economic body had been infected to a certain extent by the housing market and all the derivative instruments that had been written based on mortgages and things like that. And it was just huge. Now I don't see that. Today it's a little bit, this time it's different. I know everyone says that. I do happen to agree with you. I think there might be an economic slowdown, a little tapering in the housing market, which we're due for. That happens. But it's based on the figures I looked at, price to rents, debt levels. Some of the bad loans are starting to creep back in, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was. In other words, there was nowhere near as there today. There's a little bit of fuel for a spark to ignite a recessionary explosion, but nowhere near to the level of bullshit that was happening in 2005, 2006. I mean, nowhere near. So I'm not worried about that. Also, in the case of Deutsche Bank, I think this is very limited and specific to Deutsche Bank. I ended up going and researching the German banks. And Deutsche Bank, it sounds like the problem is squarely with them. In other words, there's not contagion. Now, Deutsche Bank is, quote, too big to fail. It accounts for half your banking industry. Well, you may not be living in Germany. But I was looking, I didn't realize just how lopsided the banking industry was in Germany. I mean, you could say the European Union. But Deutsche Bank has 2.08 trillion. 2 trillion under management. The next one has like $500 billion. The number two guy. Like a quarter the size of Deutsche Bank. You add up all the other major banks in Germany, they maybe account for half the banking industry. And Deutsche Bank accounts for the other half. So Deutsche Bank is big. It's also very, integral to the European economy. At one time, it was I remember when I was working in banking in the 90s, I remember Deutsche Bank was the creme de la creme. Oh my goodness. That was like a Swiss bank, except big. And now what it looks like has become is they've been well Fargoized. They're too big. They're too bureaucratic. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. You got a bunch of corruption scandals. and just general basic incompetence. They've lost money left and right. It's a company that got too damn big, and you're headed up by a bunch of banking douchebags. This is what bankers do. They're not smart. They're not intelligent. They don't know how to make profit. They just know how to do turnover because that's how they're paid, is on sales, not profits. So they may go belly up. They did become profitable in 2018. They've been liquidating their assets. That's a bad sign. I looked at their cash flow statement. But let's just assume they're going to go belly up, or they're going to have to be restructured or something like that. Is that going to have a fallout to the extent that you're concerned, like, oh, I had to lay people off when Lehman Brothers? I don't think so. Because what caused Lehman Brothers to go bankrupt was the economy. Was this horrifically inefficient misallocation of resources, primarily the housing market, but stupid people as well. What's going to cause Deutsche Bank to go bankrupt is Deutsche Bank, not the rest of the European economy. Now the question is, will a large bank failing like that trigger a recession? It can. You get a big enough company to go belly up, that might send some shockwaves through the economy. It might lower investor confidence. People might scale back their spending a little bit, but there's nothing structurally or fundamentally wrong to the extent it was the last during the global recession with the actual economy itself. Remember, banks and the finance industry is not the economy. Henry Ford, I think it was, says that the larger the finance industry, the banking industry is of your economy, the worse you are. And what he was pointing out there is that banks don't produce anything. They don't. They provide a service. It's a vital service. But the real economy, the production of goods and services that actually improve people's lives, that's not banking. That's food. That's McDonald's. That's cars. Internet service, which I don't have right now. Clothing. The banks are there to make it convenient for financial transactions to occur. Right? And so they are not the economy. They're vital to the economy, but they are not the economy. And so if there's something structurally wrong with a bank or the banking industry, and it has not infected the rest of the economy, you're all right. Yes, it could slow down the economy. Yes, there might be some problems. But without having looked at the actual economy of the European Union, and yes, there's going to be probably a little bit of a recession and something like that, as is, I see nowhere near the gigantic malinvestment like we saw in the dot-com days, like we saw during the Roaring 20s, although that was U.S. The housing, I don't see it. People are still stinging from that. And here's the other thing: the millennials, both European and American, ain't got no money. They don't have a place to go and overinvest. The FANGs might have been a little bit bubbly, although Facebook came out with some whopper earnings here. It's nowhere near as bad as what it was before. Now watch, something obscure will happen. It'll become the worst recession ever. But I would not worry too much about Deutsche Bank leading to you laying people off. You might have a stagnation. It's certainly not going to be good for economic growth. But it's not going to cripple economic growth because Deutsche Bank is not the engine of economic growth. It's a bunch of incompetent corporate banking douchebags who can't do anything. They're corrupt. They're bureaucratic. They're the Wells Fargo of Europe, of Germany. And then when you look at other banks, it's not you look at Europe, not just Germany, but Europe. There are other banks. You have Spanish banks, Italian banks, UK banks. You have Asian banks, American banks. Deutsche Bank it may be the biggest fish in the pond, but the pond will go on without it. And it's big enough that, yes, the European Central Bank will probably print off more euro to bail out the incompetent Deutsche Bank corporate douchebags. But I do not foresee, and again, I could be wrong, I do not foresee Deutsche Bank spreading contagion or triggering some massive recession. It might trigger a small recession, but that recession was probably going to already be on the way. This might accelerate it or exacerbate it just a touch. And then here's the other thing: you quote your revenues in pounds. Well, that's good because you may actually it's going to be good and bad. It might actually be good, and God bless Brexit. God bless the Brits. If the European Union tanks, if Deutsche Bank fails, I'll tell you this: that's going to drive the pound up. That's going to drive the people are going to flee out of the euro and go into pounds or dollars or Australian dollars or whatever. So the value of your sales will go up if your revenues are based in pounds. Unfortunately, your sales volume might go down because, again, the demand for your product goes down. But relative to the euro, your sales are probably going to go up in value. So I don't know if you're in the United Kingdom, in which case it won't really matter. But if you're in the European Union, those pounds are going to be more valuable. They're going to buy more euros. So I think you kind of have this natural hedge against the mainland EU-based recession because your sales are denominated in pounds, which is a good thing. So there's a little bit of diversification there. But to answer your question philosophically or intellectually or economically, you don't really get the connection what made Lehman collapse. It wasn't Lehman collapsing that led to you having to lay people off. That recession was happening anyway. And it was the recession. It was that misinvestment. It was going to be the economic global slowdown that not only would take out Lehman, but your company as well. Right? Lehman was not an intermediary or a cause of you having to lay people off. You were going to lay people off anyway. It's just Lehman happened to be closer to the bear that was mauling you all down than you were. In this case with Deutsche Bank, because I don't see as monstrous of a recession behind it. I even hate to say recession. I think this is going to be more like the 99-2000 recession. It wasn't a recession. It was like this economic slowdown. And then you had John Kerry and every other fucking leftist dipshit. This is the worst economy in 50 years. It's like, no, that would be the Volcker recession, you dipshit lying morons. It was just an economic slowdown. That's natural. That's good. That happens. You got to reset. You got to reallocate. All right. Let's take some time. Let's take some time off. But there's nowhere near the monster of a recession I see anyway coming down the pike. I just don't see it. So I wouldn't worry too much. But you've taken some measures to diversify. You've done pretty well. But that's what it is. You just have a really shitty bank. You don't have a shitty economy. All right, that's it. Questions, answers, assholeconsulting.com. Check out the links below. Check out the books and the podcast. We'll see you all later. Toodles.